I read books. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Welcome to Vintage SF. I'm Richard Rempel. I've been thinking a little bit about people reading books. Whenever I chat with people about books, it usually gets back to how did they start reading books? The vast majority of us had books read to us when we were young. But what happened once we got to school age? One of the things that I think is most valuable is a good school library and somebody as an advocate for reading books. I grew up in a small community, and in our school, we had 2 rooms for grades 1 through 6. I remember more about the library that was in the side shelves of the room for grade 4 to 6. On a side note, I live here in Canada. We would have to sing "O Canada" and "God Save the Queen" each day, and there was a big photo of Queen Elizabeth above the teacher's desk. I thought my grade 4 to 6 teacher looked just like Queen Elizabeth. But on to reading. So on those shelves, I discovered, I believe they were abridged editions of Jules Verne's novels and also H.G. Wells. I also can remember some Tom Swift books there. I definitely started reading some of those, and the reason is, at home, I'd started to see some science fiction on TV. Things like the original Star Trek, The Twilight Zone, and eventually in my middle school years, Space 1999. But the books that I was most interested in elementary school were books about dogs. And one of the ones that I remember the most is Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. I think this is the cover of the edition that we had in my middle school library. I'll get to that. And you can see in the description, "For the millions who love The Incredible Journey and Old Yeller, a heartwarming tale of adventure and friendship you'll never forget." I definitely read The Incredible Journey and Old Yeller as well. Old Yeller might have been one of the first movies I saw about dogs, and of course there was Lassie on TV. My problem? I was allergic. I couldn't have a dog, at least in the house. So I was obsessed with my friends' dogs and loved to visit, and I might come home sneezing. But the other obsession, which grew quickly, was science fiction from TV. From grades 7 to 12, I moved on to a bigger school in Sanford, Manitoba. And in that Sanford Collegiate Library, I found some key books that launched my interest in science fiction to another level. Around that time, I would go to bookstores with my family when we went into the city of Winnipeg, and I remember some of the first books that I bought were novelizations of some of the TV shows that I saw. So, for example, Star Trek. Here's the Star Trek reader. It has a number of novels in here, but the Star Treks that I remember were by James Blish, and here you can see the first sequence of episodes that were novelized. The artwork on the book seems to be inspired by the second pilot that was created for Star Trek, Where No Man Has Gone Before. Take a look, though, at the Enterprise. The artist must have thought it was powered by rockets. Other TV shows that I purchased novelizations were The Twilight Zone by Rod Serling. Actually, the stories were by a number of science fiction writers, including Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont. And in 1975, Space 1999, Breakaway. If you've never heard of the show, it was from ITC, the Independent Television Corporation. That was from the UK. But the show was made with both UK and American actors trying to expand the base for the viewership. But the premise itself was a bit wonky. Nuclear waste is being stored on the moon, and there's an explosion. Moonbase Alpha and its crew are thrust out of Earth's orbit. Week to week, somehow the moon reaches another solar system. They try to explore a planet, and then they have to leave that solar system, so there's a limited time that they can be on that planet. I'm not sure how that moon can pick up speed and slow down in time for those adventures, but I enjoyed the special effects and some of the, pulpy stories. But how did I get into other science fiction? Well, some of the novels and short story collections that I found in my library in middle school piqued my interest. One of the key ones for me was Planet of the Apes. Never saw the movie at this point, read the novel, which, by the way, I would recommend to anyone who does love the movies. It has enough differences that I think you'll really enjoy it as a novel. It's by Pierre Boulle. I also found things like Arthur C. Clarke's collection of stories, The 9 Billion Names of God. But more importantly, and I think this is the one that sealed the deal for me enjoying science fiction, was Childhood's End. It's copyright 1953, but this is the livery or the edition that I read when I was in middle school. It had this Dean Ellis cover. It introduced me to concepts that I had never seen before, conceptual breakthroughs or twists a la The Twilight Zone. I've read this novel a number of times and I feel like it holds up. I continue to recommend it to new readers of science fiction. Another writer whose short stories captivated me was Ray Bradbury, and I remember reading The Illustrated Man and The Martian Chronicles. I also tried out some of Isaac Asimov's short stories and eventually would read his robot novels. I also remember trying out one of Heinlein's juveniles, The Rolling Stones. The one book in middle school, though, that created a lifelong love for SF was assigned to me in grade 9. I can remember the room and the teacher, and it was The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. This cover is a Richard Powers cover, and I believe this is the edition of our classroom copies. After reading and studying and doing questions about the book, we would see the movie from 1963. We brought in the old-time film projector, must have been a reel of the film that they got from the education department, and we watched it. It has a certain charm of its own, but of course the novel was way better. From that point forward, when we went into Winnipeg and stopped by a bookstore, I would look for John Wyndham books. Eventually, once I was in high school, some of them started to come out from Penguin with Peter Lord covers. I collected all 10 of them over the years. One other book I want to mention that had a big effect on me was a book I read in grade 10 for my English class. All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Remarque, a German author. It seemed inconceivable to me that in the 1970s we would have a novel assigned to us depicting German soldiers as the protagonists. It opened my mind to see things from a different perspective. By the way, if you don't know the novel, it's from World War I, and it is memoir of German soldiers with a very distinctive ending which will stick with you forever. So those are some of the early influences I had, books which made me a reader for life. I credit my parents for reading me books, for allowing me to shop for books when we went to Winnipeg. I credit my librarians and teachers for encouraging a love of these books. I'm also thankful that they stocked some of these science fiction books in our library. Well, you may have noticed, no mention of Star Wars. Well, my love of books developed before Star Wars was released. Yes, I'm that old. I want to follow up this video by talking to other YouTubers who love books. What were some of the early influences for them? I intend to do these in live streams so you, the viewers, can interact with them if you're able to watch at the time we're filming. So the first VSF Live, Vintage Science Fiction Live, is going to feature We Read Books and have 5 other gentlemen from YouTube that you're probably well aware of if you're watching my channel. I'll be joined by Chris of Liminal Spaces, Jake of Pulp Mortem, Nick of The Book Graveyard, Tim from Secret Fire Books, and Virgil from Literally Books. So now it's your turn. In the comments below, I would love to hear how you fell in love with reading. Until next time, the live stream, keep reading.